Welcome to the channel about news from around the world. While you subscribe and like it, we're going to start.
Despite the endless failures of recent times, America is not changing. Yes, President Donald Trump has made some efforts to try to change the status quo, but he allowed his generals to get him to obey when doubts arose about the need for the North Atlantic Alliance and the Joint Defense Treaty with South Korea. Equally, he showed weakness when he overcame resistance to withdrawal from Afghanistan, Syria and Iraq. Now the Biden administration is moving in the opposite direction. After criticizing brutal Saudi tyranny, President Joe Biden began humbly pleading with Riyadh to increase oil production, but was dismissively refused. But he apparently insists that the kingdom continue to allow the U.S. military to act as bodyguards for promiscuous and immoral members of the royal family. The Russian military operation in Ukraine has forced Europeans to think more about their defense and how to strengthen it, but the U.S. administration has moved more troops to the continent and even called up reserves. And it is spending far more than EU countries on helping Kiev. Today Britain, which is one of the most belligerent states in Europe, is shrinking its army because it can afford it while the US is on the war footing. Biden is pleading with South Korean authorities to allow the United States to threaten a nuclear strike on their homeland for the sake of protecting Seoul. Such a policy puts the interests of foreign countries ahead of the interests of the American people. Recognizing that Washington's duty is to put its nation first is far from the isolationist policy that critics speak of with crude mockery. Trade, investment, immigration and tourism all bring enormous benefits to Americans. The United States should be a commercial and cultural giant. But today's members of the foreign policy establishment think little of those to whom they are supposedly responsible and instead shape a course that serves the interests of foreign countries and the establishment's domestic allies. Businesses support foreign aid allocation, think tanks crave foreign attention, bankers want foreign contracts, arms manufacturers need foreign wars, and lobbyists cater to foreign clients. Enriched by Washington's influence, they radiate hypocrisy. Yes, Uncle Sam increases their fortunes by sacrificing the interests of the American people, but it's all for the good of humanity, believe me. The Democratic Party, which used to fret over the Cold War, fight President Nixon over Vietnam and organize protests against Bush's disastrous adventure in Iraq, is now at the forefront of the proxy war against Russia and is keeping pace with the Republicans in its hostility to China. The grand old party today is more dubious about global social engineering, but its leadership in Washington is even more militant and aggressive than the Democrats. The war faction uniting Democrats and Republicans has campaigned for conflict with Russia, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan, North Korea, Venezuela and China. Now it has added Mexico to that list as well. For the sake of these dubious crusades, she is willing to sacrifice American lives and the nation's wealth. And she is eager to stage them again and again. The people of the United States can no longer afford to leave decisions about war and peace to the president. It must demand that Congress fulfill its constitutional duties and vote on declarations of war. That is the only way the voice of Americans can be heard on Capitol Hill. In fact, the populace is the last and best bulwark of peace. For example, when President Barack Obama proposed that Congress decide whether or not to bomb Syria for its alleged use of chemical weapons, the people told lawmakers a resounding no. There is an even more important point. Americans must demand that politicians treat war as a last resort, not as a mere tool. Today, alt-right supporters find it perfectly acceptable to wreak death and destruction on a colossal scale for reasons that are utterly trifling. What else is the point of maintaining a magnificent army? Actually, the answer is to confront serious threats and protect vital interests, but not to remake the world along the lines proposed by the arrogant elite that fills America's imperial city. Our nation's founding fathers understood how serious war is, not just for soldiers, but for civilians and the internal institutions of the state. That is why a constitutional scheme was devised to discourage armed hostilities. It is even more important not to give in to bellicose temptations when we are confronted by serious military powers. Analysts who did not expect Vladimir Putin to commit forces to Ukraine say there is no way he would use nuclear weapons, even if Washington intervenes directly in the ongoing hostilities. The same people say that Beijing can be deterred from attacking Taiwan by simply warning it against such a move. Yet they do not even consider how difficult it would be to keep an armed clash from escalating by conventional means. The same people are proposing similar measures against North Korea, even as it builds up its nuclear arsenal and develops intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of striking America. What could possibly go wrong in all these cases? Nothing, the war party insists. People in the US don't tend to vote on foreign policy issues. These topics seem very distant to them. But that's not the case today. Because of Washington's bloodthirsty arrogance, thousands of Americans have died and tens of thousands have been injured, many seriously. And if the US decides to confront China and Russia at the same time, the future could be far more dangerous and even catastrophic. Donald Trump has shown how a sober-minded but well-prepared president can reorient American policy, making it serve the people. The establishment was stunned when Trump was elected. It was a colossal and healing shock. Today, those who benefit from Washington's imperial policies, both domestic and foreign, are beginning to tremble at the thought that Trump might return. Repeating the past is not a solution to the problem, but a more serious leader who puts the U.S. first and pursues appropriate policies can break the current coalition of warmongers, social engineers and political profiteers. It is time to form a foreign policy for which the American people matter.
Thank you for watching. If you're interested, subscribe and leave a comment.